Hi Bibek, welcome to Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. I believe you're coming here after quite some time. How does it feel?
Thank you, Ajit, and congratulations. It's wonderful to be back at the Gokhale Institute. I was here some 40 years ago. It was my first proper job in the sense that I worked in Presidency College, Kolkata, but that was a contractual appointment. So this was my first job. My office used to be right here in this UGC building before which we are seated.
Oh wow.
And Gokhale Institute was quite unexpected because it was not one of the places that I had thought of, so to speak. The post was advertised, I applied, I was interviewed, and I got the job. And this was a particular UGC center for the study of the East European economies. So
Right,
I
right.
was there, appointed as an associate professor.
In fact, I know that you wrote quite a few papers about East European socialist economies and pricing and so on. So perhaps I'll mention that in the program later today. But one interesting development which happened during those 4 years that you were here is that you went down the road and discovered a place called the Bhandarkar Institute.
That's correct. You see, at that point, if you were on this side of a certain road and you asked who was the famous Dandekar, people would say VM Dandekar. If you're on that side of the road and you asked who was the famous Dandekar, people would say RN Dandekar. Yes, it was quite by chance that I discovered the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, and my life changed.
In fact, it's been an abiding, if I can call it an abiding love affair. And you had such a prolific output from your scholarship of the various epics and scriptures, which of course your talk today is going to be about. But you have managed to, combine. Sometimes it's amazing. But how have you combined your career as an economist? I mean, for want of a better word, and also now a career as an Indologist.
It's difficult to answer that because fundamentally it's a question of time management. But before I answer that question, my first monograph was actually published by Gokhale Institute. It was called Income Inequality in East Europe. It was a special issue of Arthavigyan and then it was published as a monograph. I no longer have a copy. Gokhale Institute Library has a copy. But you see, economics, we may have straight-jacketed it now, but economics essentially is multidisciplinary. All the classical economics were multidisciplinary. When I was the chairman of the Railway Reforms Committee, many people began to think that I was from the railway services. So I still get emails saying, can you get me a confirmed ticket? Can you get me my appointment on this? There are some people, because I also headed a committee on law reforms, some people think that I'm a lawyer. But going back to this, I have the rather unique distinction of possessing an honorary doctorate both in economics and in
Indologist.
Sanskrit.
Oh,
Not
okay.
not law. Doctorate in law, of course, I have, but that's because of the economics thing. But economics and Sanskrit
Sanskrit.
is slightly odd.
Did you? I should mention that when you say people think that you are a railway expert or a law expert, it's not merely because of the committees you headed, but because you, I feel, if I can say so, you really go in depth into that subject.
Well,
So,
I've been writing on those things essentially. Yes.
yeah, because in my mind, I see a person who started doing work in general equilibrium theory and information economics, but
And
you've gone the whole breadth from there to railway reforms and industrial reforms, poverty, inequality. So it's a really very wide range, but I don't know how.
I should say this that Gokhale Institute then, and I hope it will become even more so under your leadership, was very, very applied,
Yes.
thanks to Dandekar and Kant. And that was the great USP. The typical economist does not want to dirty hands with data and general equilibrium. Let me write a paper, fixed point theorem. So Gokhale Institute and Dandekar taught me that work on applied stuff. So yes, I wrote papers, theoretical papers on income inequality, measuring income inequality, but I also did empirical work on income inequality in East Europe.
In fact, this is something which is a message for the young economists out there that getting your hands dirty in the sense of doing empirical work, doing field surveys, doing analysis of data is very important for an economist's work and career. You have worn hats as an academic, as a professor, but also you work with think tanks, you work with chambers of commerce. Of course, you have been on government committees, and now you are at a very senior advisory position to the Prime Minister. Uh, which of these roles you think you've been able to make? I mean, you made contributions in all your capacity, but do you see any difference in the roles you played? Uh,
No, I think it's a natural transition. It's a natural transition. The point about working with the government is you need to get your minds dirty, not your hands dirty in terms of data, but you need to move away from the abstract and talk about actual policy. And that transition is sometimes somewhat difficult for an academic economist to make. So for me, it's been a natural kind of transition. I've been fortunate because had I been thrust into this position out of the blue, I don't know what I would have done. But I had worked as economic advisor in finance
no,
ministry
that's
in the mid 90s. So in some ways, I was familiar with the working of the government. I was familiar with the data available to the government. All the data conditions have improved now. I was familiar with the political economy of the process. I was familiar with the fact that if you want to convey a message to the political classes, it has to be conveyed in a certain way.
So, I hope people don't get the wrong idea about policymakers having to have a dirty mind, dirtying their mind. But
Dirty mind in the sense of getting away from the ivory towers.
yes, yes, yes. So, can you give us an example? I know it's just off the cuff, but any example? You've been known as going against the grain, and often your thoughts are contrarian to general views. But are there examples uh, where you were convinced in your conviction about the way things were going? It had to be completely different, and
No, no, look, let me put it to you like this. What is the job of an advisor? I think the job of any advisor is to give the right advice. The job of the advisor is not to determine policy. The determination of policy is left to a higher authority. But the job of an advisor is to be honest and candid. Sometimes it so happens that the advice you've given is not acted upon. I don't think one should be unduly upset over that,
yeah.
nor should one immediately go public with that. And I'm saying this because this was a particular tendency during the UPA government, where even ministers, when they disagreed with what was being
This
done in cabinet, immediately had it headed for the next nearest TV
so
studio.
this dissent and dialogue and debate internally,
But it
but
remains internal. You
yes.
don't necessarily make it public.
Is your scholarship of the epics something that informs your economic thinking or vice versa?
I think it does, but it requires much more of time to answer that question than we have. Um, but yes, I think it does.
So
And
I
I
think,
also think that there is a lot in our texts which are in the nature of governance, which have not been adequately written about. It isn't just Kautilya, it's much, much more
of
than
course, of
Kautilya.
course, of course. So, we are very happy that you're with us today, and I hope you will keep visiting. In a manner of speaking, this is an alma mater, and you wrote your earliest papers here. Uh, as we wrap up, I want you to think about and tell us something about the profession. We have some bright young students who graduate from here. The field of economics that we cover here, as you said, we have now a much broader spectrum. We go financial economics, agriculture, uh, then there is law and economics. Uh, Now, of course, things like data analytics, big data. How should a young economist think about his or her profession?
I'm not sure how to answer that. By the way, my coming here is contingent on you inviting me.
It's
Because
a
you're the boss
standing,
now.
it's
I'm
a
here
stand,
because you've invited
it's a
me.
standing open invitation.
No, look, I think we have recruited people. We, meaning as in the Economic Advisory Council, we've also recruited people, ex-students of Gokhale Institute. Not because I'm necessarily partial towards Gokhale Institute, but because they've been good. There is something we as an academic community of economists need to recognize. There is a dearth at a slightly senior level, not at the entry level. There was a generation of economists, my time and before that, who came back to India. In between, roughly your generation, you're a bit younger than me, there is a generation that never came back.
Right.
It's there in the US, it's sitting there in the US or Australia, wherever it is. So we have a big gap there.
Cohorts.
So far as the younger economist is concerned, it really depends on what that younger economist wants to do. At some point, obviously, if one is doing a master's and if one is going to stay in the academic or quasi academic community, one would have to do a PhD. But then the moot question is, do you do that PhD and stay on abroad, or are you motivated enough to come back? So that's an individual's call.
Okay. No, I know, but I think it's a very exciting profession, and it's economics is something on one end looks like statistics, applied math or mathematical. On the other hand, it could be sociology, political science, demography. So as we wrap up, I want to invite you, if you can think of, you're, I guess people know that you're also a prolific limericist. So is there an economics limericks that you want to recount?
Economics, no, look, the limericks I write for Mint, A, they, the attempt is that they should bring a smile to your lips. Doesn't always necessarily succeed. It has to be newsy because it's appearing every day, Monday to Friday, and it should not be nasty. So I stay away from politics directly.
Well, I'm thinking there was once a boy called Bibek Debroy. He came to Gokhale to sort of study and play, and then went away to bigger things. Anyway, didn't
No,
rhyme.
no, no, the last line, you haven't got the last line.
Anyway, but thank you very much, Bibek Debroy, and wonderful to interact with you, and looking forward to your public lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.